So the NFL had to get to figuring out the playoffs. Okay, so look, I could read this to you, but this is interesting. The NFL rules account for game cancellations and call for games to be seeded by winning percentage, right? So Zach Taylor's the head coach of the Bengals. He said, we want the rules to be followed. We don't want to hear about fair and equitable solutions while rules are being changed at the last minute. It's opportunities lost for us. We had control and now we don't. There were positives for a lot of teams and negatives for us. Their VP executive, Katie Blackburn, wrote in a memo to NFL teams that the proper process of making a rule change is in the offseason. So, Buyer, for people who aren't paying attention to the exactly what has changed, because it used to be based on winning percentage, what exactly changed?
So during the COVID years, what the NFL said in 2020 was that if a game was canceled, you would go down to winning percentage. And that is what Taylor is saying that they were under the impression of, or they believe that the rules were, that whether the Ravens beat the Bengals twice, the winning percentage that would come down to it, the Bengals would have a better winning percentage than what Baltimore had. And now what the NFL is saying is, well, yeah, you're going to have a better winning percentage, but since Baltimore beat you twice, we're going to flip the coin to see who's going to get home field if you guys would play in the first round.
Don't they play Baltimore this weekend?
Yes, that's the problem. So if the Bengals lose, the Ravens would be a half game back of Cincinnati for the division. And that half game could have been a loss to Buffalo, which then would have allowed the Ravens to win the AFC North. What they decided was that the Bengals are going to win. They've clinched the division because they're not going to make up the game. But because the Ravens beat the Bengals twice and there's that half game difference, that it would not be a guarantee that even though Cincinnati won the division and would have a better winning percentage, would be able to host Baltimore in that playoff game.
Well, I mean, there is one surefire way to solve that problem, right?
Win.
Yes. Just win, baby. The question is the timing. Like, you were all so concerned and all so reasonable, and then all of a sudden something works against you. Like, hold on, that's not right. And this is what I was talking about the other day, which is, I get it. It's not going to be totally fair, not going to be totally equitable. It's not. Somebody's going to get screwed in this deal, and it may be the Bengals. One, the Bengals do control that with their ability to just win the game. Say, win the game Sunday against what could be a third-string quarterback, right? No Lamar Jackson. Tyler Huntley's got a tendonitis in his shoulder, although people think he'll play. Vegas thinks they're 8.5 points better than the Ravens. Just win, baby. But I just, it's like, it's one of those things where it's the same thing that Skip Bayless got called out. Time and place. Like, is the timing such to where you can, excuse the language, bitch and moan about something that's done in completely unforeseen circumstances? Mm-hmm. I'm not disputing that it seems unfair to Cincinnati, but I don't know if there's a process that is completely and totally equitable. They're trying to find a neutral site home, right? So the neutral site AFC Championship game is no matter what, or does it depend upon teams?
It all depends. So if let's just say that this scenario, I'll tell you one that wouldn't have an AFC neutral site. Buffalo beats New England and Kansas City loses to the Raiders. And then Kansas City and Buffalo would face off in the AFC Championship game. That game would be in Buffalo because the standings, Buffalo would win the tiebreaker over Kansas City, and they would have a better winning percentage by more than that half game, if you will. Mm-hmm. So that would be a scenario.
Is there any? That's the only one.
Well, that involves a Buffalo and Kansas City. Now, obviously, if the Chargers make a run, the AFC Championship game, would be in Buffalo or would be in Kansas City, or depending on how the bracket plays out. But the scenarios only involve the Bills and Bengals because of the unplayed game.
Mm-hmm. And then we don't know where the neutral site game would be. I was told last night from somebody who's pretty important that it wouldn't be in Indy because Indy is only an hour and a half from Cincy. And even though Buffalo fans travel, it would feel unfair, which would open up Detroit and a couple of other places.
And I read, and I don't know if it was Pro Football Talk or who had it, but Detroit is actually changing their turf. So
right,
Ford
in
Field,
January, right when
would likely not be an option for that game.
Why not Vegas?
That's what I thought as well, because the Super Bowl's, not just a couple hours away, but you're in the same area when it would be in, Glendale, Arizona. You're kind of in the same region of the country.
Right, they get the Super Bowl next year anyway, so it gives them a chance to kind of prep. The field's ready, stadium's ready. It's not like you need hotel rooms. And in terms of neutral site places, like if you polled anybody from Cincinnati and Buffalo, like, hey guys, you want to go to Vegas this weekend? Like, who says no to that?
Sure.
Yes. No one says no to it. No one says no. Like any other place, you come up with like Detroit, like cost of living going up, chance of living going down. No thanks. Well, right? Indy. I always go there for the Big Ten and for Final Four, or it'll be a pro Cincinnati crowd. Minnesota seems a bit far. Plus, it's a Delta hub now, right? You remember it was Northwest Airlines? You guys remember Northwest? Pour a little liquor out for Northwest Airlines. Anyway, that was back when TWA had St. Louis as their home. There's not a perfect place for it, which makes Vegas the perfect place because, again, who says no? Hey, guys, you want to go to Vegas for a weekend? Like,
sure.
Yeah, who says no? It's great. It's awesome.
There's probably more Bills and Chiefs fans in Las Vegas than there would be, say, in Minneapolis or Dallas or, because there hasn't been a team there. It's like you would be able to probably draw more Chiefs and Bills fans from that market. That's a point I hadn't thought of, but you're right. If you watched the Niner game last week in Oakland, in Vegas, it was half Niner fans, right? And this is in Vegas and in LA, it's the same thing. You have the NFL is really popular, but it's really popular with all these teams. Anyone who's an expatriate from Buffalo, right? They're going to follow their team. Some people fly out, but many people, if you grew up in New York and you're a Bills fan, and there are Bills fans, then it would make complete sense. I look. Do I think it's unfair potentially to Cincinnati? Of course. They didn't do in this case. They didn't do anything wrong. They're playing good football. It was a bang bang play, freak play. Kid goes down. We stop. We were smart to stop the game. Nobody felt like you could play. It's too late in the season, and any other change completely disrupts everything in the NFL too much. This is the best possible scenario, and if you don't like it, I'm not really sure if there's another more equitable plan for everybody. Yes, the Bengals potentially, all these teams potentially get for lack of a better term, screwed. But this is why. Probably why the NFL took a beat. Like, hey, you guys know this. There's meal. This is like when a cop pulls you over. It's like there's a lot of paperwork if you write me up a ticket. Whereas if you just let me go, you can just let me go. And this is one of those when the NFL canceled the game, they knew there'd be a lot of paperwork and a lot of bureaucracy and red tape, and this is the best they could figure it out. It's also just a level of screwed and less screwed, and that was their decision in not replaying the game was. Listen, we aren't screwing a team out of a playoff berth. Like there isn't a playoff berth on the line. So then it wasn't as important to play that game where they felt like the ultimate importance was making the playoffs or not making the playoffs. If that was at stake, they likely would have played the game or replayed the game. But since both teams were in the playoffs, they're like, okay, well then let's just figure out how they can be less screwed within this playoff structure. And yes, I think the NFL would fully admit, and I think even Rich McKay did in talking about it, that somebody got the short end of the stick. But in the end, they're still able to stay on schedule and be less screwed than maybe somebody losing out on a playoff spot.